Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Prophets Isaiah chapter 18 in a clear and simple way, step by step.
So let's just dive right into this because it's a really fascinating question. Have you ever looked around at the world? Maybe you see people acting badly or whole nations getting hyper-aggressive, and you just think to yourself, why does it seem like there are literally no consequences? Like, why does God sometimes feel so quiet while the world is just out there growing wildly, completely unchecked? It's a huge, universal question about divine timing and justice, right? Well, today, we're going to see how Prophets Isaiah chapter 18 tackles this exact feeling, and it uses some of the most stunning, vivid imagery in the entire Tanakh. But to really get it, we've got to start right at the beginning of the chapter. The prophet drops us into this frantic, totally chaotic scene. In verses 1 and 2, Isaiah is talking to this distant, really intimidating land. He calls it a land shadowing with wings, way out beyond the rivers of Ethiopia or Kush. And the vibe here is pure urgency. You've got ambassadors and messengers frantically sailing across the sea in papyrus boats, just rushing over the water. They're sensing this massive global danger. The anxiety is palpable, like everyone is waiting for these huge empires to just violently crash into each other. So we're going to break this whole chapter down, verse by verse, keeping it strictly to the simple direct meaning, the Peshat. That way, you can see exactly how this amazing message unfolds from that initial global panic all the way to the ultimate resolution.
Now, to fully appreciate the crazy shift that's about to happen, we really need to grasp the sheer scale of what's going on here. We are stepping into a prophetic vision that essentially demands the attention of the entire planet. Over in verse 3, the text actually shouts out to all ye inhabitants of the world and dwellers on the earth. Basically, the prophet is telling every single person alive to stop, look, and listen. He says a banner, a huge standard, is going to be raised up on the mountains, and a massive trumpet, a shofar, is going to be blown. I mean, this is a universal alarm. The tension is just through the roof. The whole world is basically on the edge of their seats, watching these frantic ambassadors, completely bracing for a world war to break out. But then, the whole dynamic just abruptly flips. Instead of God reacting with this immediate, chaotic, crashing force to all this global panic, we get a vision of God quietly, patiently watching the world. The Creator is just waiting for the absolutely perfect moment before making a move. There's a master plan at work here. And, just because we can't always hear the gears turning definitely doesn't mean the machinery has stopped.
And that brings us to this incredibly profound shift in verse 4. Right after all that frantic rushing around by the ambassadors and the global alarm blaring, the prophet speaks in the name of the Creator. He says, "For thus hath the Lord said unto me, I will hold me still and I will look on in my dwelling place, like clear heat in sunshine, like a cloud of dew in the heat of harvest." Just take a second and really let those words sink in. The text paints a picture of absolute, piercing stillness. God is literally saying, I will hold me still. But, and this is absolutely crucial, this stillness, it is not absence. It's not abandonment. The verse uses two highly specific nature metaphors to describe this intentional silence: clear heat in sunshine and a cloud of dew in the heat of harvest.
So let's unpack these two phrases because they are just brilliant. First, clear heat in the sunshine. If you have ever been outside in the Middle East on a blazing, cloudless summer afternoon, you know exactly what this is. The heat doesn't make a sound. It doesn't roar at you like a thunderstorm, right? But its presence is overwhelming. It is completely undeniable. It just radiates over absolutely everything. It's this quiet, intense power. And then we have the cloud of dew. Now, in the ancient agricultural world of Israel, getting a heavy morning dew during the brutally hot harvest season was everything. It's deeply nurturing. It provides this essential moisture entirely silently. It doesn't crash down and wash everything away like a flash flood. It just gently, thoroughly coats the earth. So put those together. These two metaphors beautifully illustrate a divine presence that is intensely powerful and watching extremely closely, yet completely silent and non-interfering at this specific moment. God is watching from his dwelling place, 100% present, but deliberately holding still while the rest of the world plots and panics.
Now, let's watch how this builds as we slip into verse 5. The text actually keeps that agricultural theme going, shifting from the weather to the actual crop. It says, "For before the harvest, when the blossom is over, and the bud becometh a ripening grape." So we're tracking the natural life cycle of a grapevine here. The blossom falls off, the bud forms, and then it swells up into this nice, large, ripening grape. To anyone just walking by, everything looks like it's going flawlessly, right on schedule. The grape is getting huge, the vine is spreading out. But remember the context. Think back to those frantic nations we met at the start. This grapevine represents bad actors. It represents unchecked powers growing stronger and stronger. They think they've got it made.
They look at their own ripening grapes, their expanding empires, their stockpiling wealth, and they just naturally assume that their harvest, their big ultimate victory, is absolutely guaranteed.
And here is where we hit the real crux of the matter, the contrast. There is this incredibly dangerous illusion of unchecked natural growth happening here. These people, these nations that are just growing wildly, they're looking around thinking, man, look at us, our grapes are ripening, we are completely untouchable. They're making a massive mistake. They're looking at the clear heat of God's quiet observation and they're mistaking it for God's absence. They're confusing silence with apathy. But the reality of divine intervention is about to completely shatter that illusion. The text is winding the tension tighter and tighter. The harvest is almost here. The grape is practically fully ripe. And right at that last possible second, right when their arrogance is hitting its absolute peak, the silence snaps.
Check out the second half of verse 5. He will cut off the sprigs with pruning hooks, and the shoots will he take away and lop off. Boom! Just like that, the quiet observation ends with this sharp, violently decisive action. Now, a pruning hook, that's a curved blade farmers use in vineyards to quickly and cleanly slice away parts of a plant. You prune to abruptly cut off branches and redirect the vine's energy. And here, God steps right in and sharply cuts off the sprigs and literally lops off the shoots of these arrogant nations. Just as these unchecked powers are licking their lips, thinking they're about to reap the rewards of all this wild growth, their energy is completely severed, cut down to the stump. And the timing? The timing is impossibly precise. Notice it doesn't happen when they're just a tiny, fragile blossom. No, it happens exactly when they think they've crossed the finish line and cemented their dominance.
Which drops us directly into the really stark, gritty reality of verse 6. I mean, it's one thing to get abruptly snipped off the vine, but what actually happens to those branches once they hit the dirt? The text doesn't just let them fall gently to the ground to be peacefully forgotten. Oh no, it describes their ultimate fate in incredibly stark, uncompromising terms.
Reading right from the top of verse 6, "They shall be left together unto the ravenous birds of the mountains and to the beasts of the earth." These branches, which, remember, are the arrogant, unchecked powers that just got pruned, they are completely discarded. Just left out in the open, totally abandoned, they become literally nothing more than food for scavengers. The ravenous birds of the mountains and the beasts of the earth just descend on them. It's a picture of the ultimate loss of dignity and power. Those mighty empires that were sending ambassadors frantically rushing across the oceans just a few verses ago, now they're reduced to carrion. The whole illusion of their invincibility is totally stripped away by a single, perfectly timed stroke of divine justice. And then, the text gives us this really fascinating little detail to drive home just how complete and final this downfall is. Verse 6 wraps up by saying that the birds shall summer upon them and the beasts shall winter upon them. Now, what does it actually mean to summer and winter upon something? Well, it means they are going to be there all season long, fully exposed to the elements. Summer and winter, that represents a full, complete calendar cycle. In biblical literature, using this cyclical nature of time tells us, hey, this isn't just a temporary bump in the road for these pruned branches. This is it. It's a permanent end to their season of unchecked growth. It's a complete, inescapable consequence. That wild arrogance that grew unchecked for a season is now subjected to a full year, a complete cycle of just being dismantled and devoured by the natural world.
But then, the whole narrative takes this absolutely magnificent, dramatic turn in verse 7. In that time shall a present be brought unto the Lord of hosts. Think about what just happened. After the silent, patient observation, after the sudden, sharp pruning with the hooks, and after the total consumption by the birds and beasts, the whole world just witnessed this jaw-dropping display of divine justice. And what's the response? It's not more rebellion. It's deep, profound awe. The response is to willingly bring a present, a grand tribute to the Lord of hosts. See, the pruning of the wicked doesn't just end in mindless destruction. Its ultimate purpose is to bring about this universal, global recognition of God's supreme authority.
So, who exactly is bringing this present? The text describes him so vividly, and it brilliantly loops the end of the chapter right back to the beginning. This tribute is coming from a distant, highly formidable nation. The verses describe them as a people tall and smooth, a people terrible from their beginning onward. Meaning, they inspire real awe and fear. They have a history of being incredibly powerful. They're called a sturdy nation that treads down, meaning they have this overwhelming military or physical strength, living in a place whose land the rivers divide. Guys, this is exactly the same mighty Ethiopian or Kushite nation from verses 1 and 2, the same ones whose ambassadors were frantically rushing around in a panic.
This is huge. It shows us that even the most intimidating, most powerful nations on Earth, the ones that literally tread down others, will ultimately recognize the power of the Creator. When they see the perfect timing of God's justice, even the mightiest armies on Earth willingly transform from frantic warriors into humble people bearing tribute.
And where do they bring this incredible present? Verse 7 tells us exactly where. To the place of the name of the Lord of hosts, the Mount Zion. Now, it is really important to catch the title being used here, Lord of hosts, or in Hebrew, Sabaoth. That specific title refers to God as the absolute commander of all earthly and heavenly forces, which is just the perfect title to use when a mighty military nation is submitting to him, right? And Mount Zion is the ultimate physical and spiritual destination for this tribute. Just look at the journey this chapter took us on. It moves from global panic to a quiet, observing presence up in a heavenly dwelling place, out into the agricultural fields of the world where the arrogant are violently pruned, and finally, it zeroes right back in on Mount Zion in Jerusalem. It's the ultimate focal point where the nations of the world finally, willingly acknowledge God's absolute sovereignty.
So let's boil all this down. What's the core message we're supposed to take away from this powerful vision? Let's look at the key, simple ideas, the pashat, that we've pulled from the text today. First off, God's timing is patient, but it is flawless. That silent, clear heat, that doesn't mean God isn't there. It means He is waiting for the exact perfect moment to act. Second, unchecked power is a total illusion. You can grow and swell like a ripening grape. You can build massive, intimidating empires. But man, you can be pruned instantly when the time comes. And finally, ultimate power leads to universal recognition. Seeing true divine justice in action ultimately causes even the most terrible, sturdy, frightening nations to recognize and honor the Lord of hosts at Mount Zion.
Okay, but how do we actually apply this? Like, what are the practical life lessons we can take from Isaiah chapter 18 and use in our daily lives right now? Number 1, practice patience and trust the process. When things feel totally silent or when it feels like the world is chaotic and the bad guys are winning unchecked, remember the clear heat and the morning dew. Trust in perfect timing. Number 2, do not be fooled by the temporary success of bad actions. Seriously, just because someone's grapes are ripening unchecked today does not mean the pruning hook isn't coming tomorrow. And number 3, cultivate humility. Knowing that ultimate authority belongs to the Creator should really keep us grounded. If the most terrible and sturdy nations eventually humble themselves and bring tribute to Mount Zion, we should absolutely recognize our place and practice that same humility every single day.
Just to really lock this in, let's do a super quick recap of the narrative arc we just walked through together. We started off with the chaotic, frantic rushing of ambassadors and this massive global alarm. Then we shifted to the quiet, sunny watch from the dwelling place, God observing silently but intensely. Then came that sudden, decisive pruning with the hooks right before the harvest. We saw the stark aftermath, where the arrogant branches were left for a full summer and winter to be devoured by the birds and beasts, and it all culminated in a grand, awe-inspiring tribute brought by a mighty, distant nation all the way to Mount Zion. So the next time you feel overwhelmed or frustrated by the noise of the world, just ask yourself, are you mistaking God's quietness for absence, or are you prepared for the harvest?
Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.